Hi, so I'm going to give you a bit more of an overview of what changing some of the different parameters looks like in terms of the project. So first, I'll change the resolution of the SVO, or sparse voxel octree. So currently, we're at 256 resolution. So this is one of the highest resolutions that we have. And so you can see in the curtains, you can see the reflection of the floor here from some of the specular reflections. And also you can see a lot of the geometry details sort of on the curtains and stuff. And so if I change this to 64 to the lowest and rebuild, we can see there's less reflection on the floor, or quite a big change, and so less color bleeding as well from the curtains. So if I go back and change to SVO as a comparison for that, you can see that on the curtains, the lighting is there's self-shadowing between the sort of folds of the curtains much better than there is at 64, for example. So you can see that here the curtains sort of, the light is just more general because the area is much bigger. I won't look at the middle resolution because as you can imagine, it's just sort of in between those two. Next, I'll look at what changing the number of cones does. So this is for each fragment, we send out 6 diffuse cones and 1 specular. So you can imagine reducing the number of cones results in a kind of potentially a more patchy or less accurate view of what the light looks at that point because it's able to cover less of the hemisphere. So if I reduce it to say to 1 even, this is perhaps not the best example. If I move the light here and I come up into this alcove, this could be much better. So if we have it at 6, we can see if we look along the roof. Oh, and let me rebuild to 256 as well. So we can see at 256, if we look along the top of the sort of arches, we can see a sort of nice fall off of the light. And as we go to lower, we can see that this fall off becomes less smooth and more jagged. And the same if we look at the specular reflections on the left, we can see that as we increase these, we're able to see more of the light. And let me also increase the thickness of the cones there as well. So we can see sort of the changes and how, especially the shadowing on the floor becomes kind of more of a straight line. And as we add more cones, there's more of a gradient. So adding even more cones obviously would be an even better way to sample the hemisphere, but it adds a lot of time to the forward pass, which we can see at the top here. So as we reduce the number of cones to 1, the GPU forward pass, or the forward fragment shader, here it's at around sort of 7, 6, and then as we go up to 6 cones, it goes to sort of 16, 17. So it can add a lot of time per frame. Next, we'll look at the difference between the shadow map resolutions. So at a very low resolution, we can see on the floor here how low resolution the shadowing looks. So that just means that when we inject our radiance, we sample from less points. And so as we increase the resolution of the shadow map, it becomes much more accurate. And also the shadow map is also used to calculate the PTF shadowing. So it looks much worse. Now the next thing I'll show, I'll reset the light to the center and come down here and I'll spawn in some dynamic objects. So we have 2 modes for this. So if I spawn in some now, we can see these dynamic objects, they receive global illumination and they have shadowing, but they don't contribute any global illumination to the scene right now. So this is because the SVO currently is just built once at the start or whenever we change resolution, and then the injection and filtering into the SVO takes place every frame. So this is what enables and then at the cubes, when we just do the forward pass, we still sample the voxels around them. So this is helpful, but as the geometry changes, it doesn't change for the cubes. So the SVO is just built once, in this case without the dynamic objects in. If I rebuild now though, it might even include them. But I also set up a mode, so when we set the SVO to the lowest resolution to 64, and we set the number of cones to something like 4, we have an option called dynamic SVO. So this actually rebuilds the SVO at every frame. And so we can see here, let me get a bit better lighting. So maybe boost the indirect lighting a bit. Maybe we'll be able to see it a bit better. So it can be hard to see this, but we should be able to see some color bleeding from the cubes. If I come in like this a bit. It's very hard to see because of the indirect lighting as a whole. Let me turn that down and increase the specular. Oops. No. It's very hard to see. Let me spawn in some more cubes and increase their scale. So if we look over here on the left, we can see some of the changes in global illumination as the cubes move around. So this can be quite sudden as of the way they're spinning and self-occluding. But they do actually contribute global illumination to the scene in this case. And we're able to run at a frame rate of around 30, which is pretty good. So some limitations with this though, we're rebuilding the whole SVO, even though when we look at the voxels, this won't be a pretty view by the way. So one thing to consider as well is that the voxel size is really small here, and it's not able to model the cubes very well. So if I increase the cube scale even more, we can see it's not really reflective of how big the cubes actually are. So if we had a higher, because it needs to occupy the whole voxel, if we had a higher resolution for the SVO, it would be able to model this better. But we can't due to resource constraints and not being able to hit the FPS targets. But if I decrease the cube scale, so if we're at 1, say, actually, it might look reasonable. But we can see it's not accurate at all to the size of the cubes. So if we see the size of cubes here and here, they're modeled sort of probably about 5 times as big. But it is able to run in real time, which is a big key part. But yeah, thank you so much.